Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Elevating Performance with Choline, Mental Performance, Sports and Daily Life. I'm Liz McNamara, Sales and Business Development Manager for Australia and New Zealand for Balchem, and I'm thrilled to have you join us. Today, we're joined by our resident choline expert, Tom Drook, who will be diving into the latest trends and scientific breakthroughs in the performance space. Tom will share how VitaCholine is an innovative solution and can help you formulate the next generation of products designed to support brain function, athletic performance, and liver health. By way of introduction, Tom leads the VitaCholine business for Balchem, driving key science, innovation, and marketing initiatives globally. He served for several years as the chair of the Council for Responsible Nutrition Consumer Survey Advisory Committee and has been a frequent contributor to dietary supplement trade magazines. Tom earned his BA from Dartmouth College and his MBA from Stern School of Business. Tom has a wealth of knowledge in consumer health and brings extensive experience to Balchem's nutrition business. At the end of the session, we will have time for some questions. So at any time between now and then, you can submit questions through the Q&A function or the chat function in Teams. And any questions we don't have time for at the end of the session, we will answer by email. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to view and emailed out to you shortly after. So by way of the agenda for today, so we're going to start with an introduction to Balchem, and then Tom's going to take us through the consumer insights and give a really good overview of how choline supports the body. Then we will review the research behind how choline impacts performance through the lifespan. We'll share our latest updates on the direct-to-consumer marketing that we're doing. And then finally, before question time, we'll talk through some products and product concepts just to give you some inspiration. So I'll start with an intro to Balchem. So Balchem's vision is to make the world a healthier place. And we achieve this through our mission of building a global nutrition and health company that delivers trusted and science-based solution to customers. So if you jump to the next slide. So Balchem was founded in 1967. It's a publicly listed company with the head office in New Jersey, and it's made up of human nutrition and health, animal nutrition and health, and specialty. We've got over 1,300 staff located around the world. And next slide, please. So making the world a healthier place is what we're here for, and we do this by providing high quality, well-researched ingredients that provide solutions across the lifespan. These include OptiMSM, which is ultra pure support for joints, hair, skin, and nails. Albion Minerals, which are the most researched chelates with superior absorption and tolerability. VitaCholine, which Tom is going to talk through today. K2 Vital, which is our stable 99.7% all-trans vitamin K2 MK7, the bioactive form. And Optifolin Plus, our newest product, an active folate bound to choline for stability and methylation advantage. I'm happy now to hand you over to Tom, and I look forward to seeing you and your questions later on. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you so much, Liz, and I'm glad to be joining everyone today. I'm happy to be talking with you about VitaCholine. I'm going to start with some insights on cognition. So as I move along here, I think it's important to realize that over time, there has been a change. Physical well-being was once the dominant factor. And really what people look to the supplement category for. It now really does encompass all over well-being of mind and body. So mental and physical health are having equal levels of importance. And a lot of different places can be impacted by good brain nutrition. For example, in kids, you've got obviously mental development, agility, And then as you get a little bit older, certainly people want to focus and then also unwind during the evening. So this is really what the consumer is looking for. The nice news is that that's backed up really by the data. So if what we see here, and this is from the Nutrition Business Journal, it's basically looking at sales in the US, but this trend has been shown throughout the globe as well. It's expected to be about a $1.6 billion category, and it's only 2% of the overall supplement space. So really a lot of room to grow, and the growth rate per year is expected to be around 9% over 2024. We'll get a confirmation on that when they put their new volume out this year. But you can see strong, significant growth up into the 10% estimated in 2026. So good area to be investing in. Another fact, consumer interest in choline is really starting to rise. Here you see from 2020 to 2025, Google Trends data, which shows worldwide a pretty significant trend up in choline. So we know that what was once a little bit of a challenge on awareness is starting to turn, and people are really beginning to recognize choline as an essential nutrient. So let me talk a little bit more about what is choline. We like to think of choline as a super transporter. Ultimately, all nutrients really help in transporting and doing things throughout the body, but choline shines in its role due to three key ways that it affects and transports things throughout the body. Number one is it is transporting methyl groups, and that really helps support gene expression and overall cell function. We'll dig into that in a little bit. It also is unique, and this is one of the things that makes choline an essential nutrient, in that it helps transport fats out of the liver. And that way they can get into the bloodstream, be converted to energy, thus supporting energy metabolism. We can also see a great role of choline as one of the building blocks of acetylcholine, which helps transport signals through the brain and out into the nervous system, into the muscles, all supporting mood, memory, and attention. As far as the aspects of brain health, the number one impact really is it's helping to keep the integrity of all of our cells in our body. You can see right next to the number one, those two little red shapes, those are choline as phosphatidylcholine, which is a phospholipid with choline at the head, and then a glycerol and a phosphate background, and two fatty acids on the tails. And those orient themselves naturally into a form with the tails inside and the choline to the outside. And that is what forms our lipid bilayer. And this is actually the cell membrane. And that allows transport back and forth in between, but really maintains the overall integrity of the cell. It also, as I said on the prior slide, supports neurotransmission. When you combine choline with acetyl coenzyme A, that's what you get, where you get acetylcholine, which is really I like to think of it as the eye messenger of the brain. It's basically speeding messages all throughout and really transporting those from neuron to neuron within the brain at phenomenal rates. We also see that it helps regulate gene expression. And the important thing is cells, or rather genes, need to be activated. They're not just the way we get them from our parents, but we also have certain activations that happen as we go through diet, exercise, etc. And choline, really, by donating those methyl groups, is helping to regulate the gene expression and making sure that things are spelled the way they ought to be. And that's really supporting mood, memory, and attention. EFSA, which is one of the most distinguished science agencies in the globe, has given us 4 EFSA health claims on choline. 3 of which are what we call Article 13, or general adult claims, really focused around normal lipid metabolism, maintenance of normal liver function, and contribution to normal homocysteine metabolism. So a lot of the metabolic functions. That same benefit translates into an Article 14 claim, which is for infants, and that says that choline intake during pregnancy and lactation helps to maintain the normal liver function of the fetus and exclusively breastfed infants. So EFSA has recognized the important role that choline plays in metabolic health and has given several of these claims. In the US, we also have what we call structure function claims, which are on cognition, performance, and a lot of other areas. So I wanted to start a little bit about why are we even worried about choline? And I think the most important thing to know is that choline intakes are low globally. If you look here, and this is specifically in Europe, we see that the median choline intake in all of these countries where EFSA actually tracked and did the research to find out what the intakes were are well below the desired level of 400 milligrams in the Europe. That's the European DRV. We do not have overall data for any of the countries in APAC, but what we do have is for pregnant women. We know that in Australia and New Zealand, the 450 level, which is what's desired during pregnancy, is again not being met in Australia. It's not being met in New Zealand, nor in China. You see a whole bunch of other countries here. So at a time when choline is needed the most, there's a real shortfall in the diet for people to be able to get the choline they need for all those new cells. Choline is available in a number of different forms. The two at the top, choline chloride and choline bitartrate, those are the forms that Balchem has. And they really have some of the highest weights in terms of amount of choline as part of the overall molecular structure. You can see choline chloride is about 75% choline, and choline bitartrate is about 41%. So big difference between these forms and the forms below are choline salts are freely absorbed in the system. And that means they disassociate easily without any need for enzymatic activity. And then the free choline becomes immediately available for the body to use. The other forms you see are what's called bound forms. And those bound forms require additional steps. So there's phosphate groups, or in the case of phosphatidylcholine, there's fatty acid tails. All of those elements need to be broken down by enzymatic steps in digestion. And that is what leads to a slightly longer absorption profile, but also a much more significantly small content of choline overall as part of the molecule. The interesting part is these forms are all very different, free, bound, but they're all ultimately absorbed in the same fashion. What we see is whatever we take in, we digest, and as part of that, the choline is absorbed with the carrier, whether that's the choline bitartrate or alpha GPC. That gets broken down, and what goes into the blood circulation is either phosphocholine or free choline. That then is built up and to a different carrier, and at which point it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And that's where all the different types of choline that are brought into the brain are built. They're built right there in the brain, whether it's acetylcholine, CDP choline, or phosphocholine. All of them are actually made there, and that's a rate that is proportional to the serum choline concentration. So we know it's getting in the brain. Now I want to talk a little bit about vitacholine and all the different studies that we have throughout life. First off, one of the things I'd like to highlight is that choline really is an essential nutrient. Back in 1998, one of the greatest researchers in choline, Stephen Zeisel, we'll talk about this in a little bit, did a study which showed that choline can be made in the body, but not in quantities sufficient to actually satisfy the body's need. So because of that, choline is deemed an essential nutrient. You have to take it and get more in the diet. You can't make enough within the body. One of the things we really love to highlight about our vitacholine is our safety. First and foremost, we use only L+ tartaric acid. which is a byproduct of wine production coming from nature. That is our number one source for choline bitartrate in supplements. And we also have non-GMO and low odor, which some of which can be an issue with choline. For quality, we know we're the leading infant formula manufacturer supplier in the world. So we really are held to some of the greatest and most rigorous auditing standards. And we have dual site production in both Italy and the US. For research, you're going to hear about this, but it's one of the most clinically studied human choline sources, and it has that high choline content and very fast absorption. And we were recognized for this with an award in 2022 from NutraIngredients USA, who deemed us the ingredient of the year for a fresh approach to cognitive and brain health. So we like to talk about choline and say it's really about supercharging your body and mind. So the role that choline plays across the lifespan starts before you're even born. Obviously, mom is doing her best to try and make sure her infant has all of the things it needs to thrive in life. And choline is there going from mom to the baby to help all of these new cells developing. And we'll see that sometimes even the amounts that are talked about in the dietary reference values or the reference daily intakes may not even be high enough to meet needs. As we transition through life, it takes on a role as really guarding our cells, making sure those cell structures are strong. It's helping us regulate mood. It's helping us turn potential into performance. And of course, it's also transforming fat into fuel, as I described earlier. So we're going to dive a little bit into a few of these areas. When we talk about mom's best friend, obviously it is the foundation of strong brain development, along with another set of nutrients. Needed, obviously, when you're building all of these new cells, all of that phosphatidylcholine that's making up cell membranes, that needs to come from mom. So mom has a store of choline. The requirements are higher during pregnancy, and that's where we see increased demand. At that time, however, only 4% in the US, and we saw several instances of globally as well, are actually getting enough choline. So this is a really serious shortfall at a critical time. When we talk about passion catalyst, what we mean is really transporting potential into performance. And I'm going to dive a little deeper into this one. We think of choline as the champion of the body-mind connection. It's really helping the brain power the muscles. One of the other factors that choline has is it optimizes nitric oxide in the bloodstream. And that's a vasodilator. It dilates the blood cells, and that allows for greater delivery of the nutrients to the muscles. And it's all operating at the neuromuscular junction, so really propelling us and moving us forward. So how does it do that? Well, here you see an example of a neuron with the axon terminal at the top, and then there's a postsynaptic cell which is receiving information on the bottom. This is how signals are translated from one neuron to another through the axon and into the other cell. And the way that happens is in the mitochondria, acetyl coenzyme A is combining with choline, and that's actually creating acetylcholine. And then that is the currency which actually translates over, activates a receptor on the other side, and does what it needs to, whether it's activating muscle fibers or all of these different things. That's what really is supporting our nervous system activation and controlling our muscles, is that connection from cell to cell and to the brain and through the muscles. One of the ways we know this is actually from a fine motor task study that was done back in 2015, reported in Nature Scientific Reports. And the researchers were interested in knowing how might choline supplementation improve visual motor performance. So in a group of healthy young folks around 20 years old, mixture of men and women, they did a number of assessments over time, about a two-hour period. And the placebo group received an orange drink, And the intervention group received that same drink with 800 milligrams of choline as vitacholine, choline bitartrate. And so that product actually, they did a study each 20 minutes, and then at 70, they did a visual motor task. And you can see they measured things like pupil size, heart rate, blood pressure, and mood and arousal. And all of this was tracked over time, and there was a task again at 70 minutes. So how do we measure choline's impact on cognitive performance? Well, this is what's called a motoric aiming test. And essentially, there is a target that moves around on the screen. And once that 70-minute mark comes, the participants are trying to hit as close to the center of the target as possible while it moves around on the screen. That, once they click, gets them a score depending upon how close they are to the center. And that really measures accuracy and reaction time. They examined the pupil size throughout because that is a marker of cholinergic function in the brain and the nervous system. So if the pupils are more constricted, that means the cholinergic network is being activated. Choline also improves visual motor performance in a couple of different ways. We saw that targeting was about 9% closer in this group, and that's as the hit distance to the center, and that was significant finding. And then the number of misses was significantly lower for the most accurate participants. So those who were already quite good at the task had a much more significant rate of lower misses. So 2.6 times fewer misses, showing that choline supplementation significantly improved accuracy, decreased errors, and really favors accuracy over speed. So you can think of this having an application in several different areas of fine motor coordination. This chart shows us the increase in cholinergic activation. If you look at the green line, what you see is the pupil size of the control participants really did not change over time. Very small changes, but essentially flat over time. What we see with the choline group is that at 20 minutes, there is a significant decrease in pupil size, down around 6% smaller, and getting down as low as 8 at 40 minutes. And when the task is taken on, we can see that there's a correlation between the pupil size and the behavior. So when those hit distance and real-time targeting tasks were happening, that is when the pupil size was actually most significant still. And you can see the difference between the misses and the hit successful hits. So moving on, choline also has a role in supporting mood, memory, and muscle control through the acetylcholine neurotransmitter. You think about our bodies as we get older, obviously we need choline on a regular basis to help preserve normal cognitive function. Cells continue to be made on a regular basis, but as we age, choline production in women at least drops significantly after menopause. So again, if you think of this as like iMessage for your brain, you really need to maintain those levels of choline in order to have your brain functioning and focused at the highest levels. So in a study done back in 2004, a group really looked at, is choline ingestion actually increasing the amount of choline in the brain? And this is verifying, does choline bitartrate enter the brain? So again, 11 healthy males here, young age of about 24. And for 2.5 hours, they took choline and were observed and through what's called magnetic resonance spectroscopy. And then there was a period of time where they received no choline. So there was choline, they give it time to get in. And then the next thing you have is this magnetic resonance spectroscopy, which looks at choline-containing compounds like betaine, phosphatidylcholine, et cetera. Then normal levels of creatine and phosphocreatine, which we would expect to be unchanged. And then N-acetyl aspartate also as well. So those are kind of the controls to see, okay, now we know these aren't changing, but other things are, meaning the choline. And basically what we see is a very good correlation between the time post-choline ingestion and the average percent rise in choline metabolites within the brain. So we see the ratio of choline to these other controlled is much more significant, and it increases over time up to that 2-hour period. We see that for both choline creatine and choline to N-acetyl aspartate. And the interesting part here is that in magnetic resonance spectroscopy, this actually a 3% or a 6% actually equates to about a 10 to 20% increase in phosphocholine, which is an important precursor to acetylcholine. So we know it's getting into the brain and it's increasing concentrations. What we also know is that as you get older, there is an impact on choline uptake within the brain. So this was the similar group looking to examine a healthy group of younger adults, in this case about 32 years old, with the same level of choline as an older group, mean age of 73. So really, we wanted to look and see what's the amount of choline getting into the brain and also how much is in the bloodstream. And what this test showed us is that brain choline uptake does decrease with age. So if we look on the left, this is the plasma choline measured in the serum blood. So we see very little difference between the young and the older subjects. So we know the choline's getting into the bloodstream, it's being metabolized. When you look on the right, however, that same choline to creatine ratio is much lower for the older subjects. So we know the choline is getting into the blood, but the uptake into the brain is significantly lower in the older group. That tells us it's really important to get enough choline as we get older. If we take that a little bit further and say, how does that correlate to cognitive structure and cognitive function? There's an excellent epidemiological study, and this was done with the cohort of the Framingham Heart Study offspring. It's a very large cohort. You see about 1,400 men and women, broad range across adults. And this group was examined to look at a number of different measures of structure and function. The first was white matter hyperintensity volume, which we'll see in a second, and then 4 measures of cognitive function related to verbal and visual memory, learning, and executive function. So how choline is related to healthy brain structure, I told you it's forming part of those phospholipid bilayer and all the different cells. Well, it's really prevalent throughout the brain as a result. And what you see on the left with the letter C there is an area, you can see the white spots in the D version, they're actually highlighted in red. And that is a loss of myelin and axons in the brain. And that is called white matter hyperintensity volume. And what it means is there's less functional myelinated brain cells, and high levels of WMHV, as it's called, is linked to poor cognitive function and even brain atrophy. And what you see is the higher levels of white matter hyperintensity volume are correlated to the first quartile of intake, which is the lowest quartile. So when you compare, and you can see a fairly nice response in a very linear fashion, where the amount of choline that was taken in the diet is very much related to the amount of a reduction in lower white matter hyperintensity volume. That also nicely correlates to better cognitive performance. Again, if you're seeing on the left, that's the lower choline group to the higher choline group quartile on the right. And across verbal memory, visual memory, which is done by a recall score, both of these functions were associated with better visual and memory at the higher choline intake levels. So we know not only is it actually having a structural impact, but it's having a functional impact as well. One interesting study that's come out, which this is about, this has been published in abstract form only, and we expect it to be published this year, relates to what I talked about earlier in the life stage of menopause. And this looks at, in a group where the participants were given a large amount of choline, or they were given a placebo, And then they were actually given what's called a functional MRI, and they do tests as they go along. So it's a 3-hour process overall. They do standardized tests, and the researchers actually demonstrate what parts of the brain are more active. And what's interesting in the choline group, you can see the posterior cortex, which is that bright red circled, and the cortical brain efficiency area in the hippocampus was actually correlated to a younger brain pattern in the choline group. So essentially, the brain behaves like a younger brain when you supplement choline back in after the estrogen has been lost, which is really how women produce choline in their bodies. So this tells us, really choline levels are very essential during menopause in order to maintain that younger brain process and decrease the and increased efficiency. So the last piece I'm going to talk about, most related to physical performance, is the role of choline as metabolism master. And we think of that as really transforming fats into fuel. This is going to rely very much on the repletion study I talked about, which actually showed the essentiality of choline by demonstrating that when you don't get enough choline, it actually leads to functional damage within the liver and the muscles. So we know why it's important. It helps generate phosphatidylcholine, which is I already said, a structural component of cell membranes, but it also forms other structures to help transport lipids throughout the body, which is helping to support fat metabolism. If you don't have enough choline, organ damage and dysfunctional lipid metabolism occurs. And this was demonstrated by looking at, how choline is built as part of the phospholipid layer. Basically, choline is made a couple of different ways. One is called the PEMT pathway, which is reliant on estrogen, and the other is the CDP choline pathway. That is how phosphatidylcholine is built, but only through the PEMT pathway can fatty acids, including DHA, be moved into circulation and uptake in the tissue. It's also the way that the fat is taken out of the liver. There's a structure called the micelle, which forms a special form of structure called a very low density lipoprotein, and that's how fat gets exported out of the liver. So the reason we know this is because of a study that occurred back in the late 1990s, where Dr. Zeisel and his professional colleagues looked at what do we think the dietary requirements are in order to maintain a healthy population. And so they did with the primary endpoints of looking for choline deficiency markers where there was an actual effect on dysfunction within the body. So the way this is done is in a hospital setting. It takes a long period of time. And basically these adults, 57, healthy, again, you can see across the age span, for about 10 days, they get what we believe to be the amount of choline that is needed to keep the body healthy, 550 milligrams. Then they take them at day 10 and they actually put them on a diet that is nearly depleted of choline. They continue on that path until they start to see in tests a marker of choline deficiency, some sort of an enzyme or any other sign of enzyme of organ dysfunction. Then they stepwise replete choline back into the system until they get to 100%. And this is really to see how does choline impact human health. And what we saw was in the group that were given the no choline, about 70% developed choline deficiency. So that means they had some sort of an impact on their body. Interestingly, 32% didn't, but we know that that's probably related to the fact that women can make their own choline, and that can upregulate in times of choline deficiency. When you look at the actual impact of those groups who are choline deficient, 70% of them experience liver dysfunction. And this is shown by enzymes within the bloodstream. And then there was also 5% who showed only muscle dysfunction and 26% who showed both. So this really shows something is having an impact and really starting to impact both liver and muscles. So why does choline deficiency result in liver dysfunction? Well, we know it's happening first by the researchers measured the ratio of liver fat to spleen fat, which should not change. But when you take the choline deficient stage, what you see is the ratio goes up significantly. When you put choline back into the diet, which is that green bar, it goes back down close to normal. So what we're seeing is a behavior where fat intakes, or rather fat retention, is increasing relative to the spleen within the liver. About 95% of subjects had some degree of liver damage. And then you see on the right the different enzymes that are markers of liver health. And what you see is, again, a pattern between the two on the left where the AST and the LD, which are both markers, there was a peak when the choline is taken out of the diet, and it goes back to normal. So this is really what led the research to include it's essential for normal liver health. We also know that it had an impact, and an even more striking impact you can see here, because of enzymatic activity related to muscle dysfunction. That is measured by creatine phosphokinase, which spikes when you have muscle damage. And what you see is during the depletion period, a significant rise in the level of blood CPK, again, in about 1/3 of subjects. But as soon as choline is given back in the system, this really resolves those dysfunctional markers. So what we know is this indicates choline needs are so important that the body will start to break down liver cells and muscle cells to be able to get that choline it needs in order to function. If we look at some of the products that we have that contain choline, and specifically in some cases VitaCholine, this is where you see some interesting trends coming in the marketplace. In the middle, I'm going to call out three of these different infant formulas. It is regulated in most countries that choline must be included in non-dairy infant formula. And for various reasons, most of the manufacturers put it in all formulas, whether it's non-dairy or dairy. There's choline in there at the level required for infants. So that was kind of where a lot of the choline growth started, where we're seeing increased number of products really being launched. And these are from the US and a few in Europe. What you see is a lot more in the prenatal space within supplements, particularly at the 550 milligram level as an adjunct product to a prenatal multivitamin. So you see prenatals along with a choline supplement at 550. That helps replicate some of the studies that were done on prenatal. But we also see it coming into liver detox products, into cell vitality products. So a lot of these different segments are actually benefiting from choline. We also see it now, if you look to the right, a big increase in food. It's been put in milk for growing years, for child development, but it's also becoming more prevalent in a lot of pre-workout formulas. Here you see a few brands, Applied Nutrition's Body Fuel, Ghost, and Rise have all recently put in significant levels of choline in order to have that claim and really demonstrate that they've got choline within the system that comes along with all those positive cognitive effects that we saw in the studies, particularly related to the motoric aiming task. So this is becoming increasingly important as people think about physical and mental performance, having the levels of acetylcholine you need in order to function at peak performance. And the ones that you see within the dashed box lines are actually co-branded, which is one of the nice features of VitaCholine. We do offer co-branding so that you can call out the fact that you're using the best source of choline in your actual product. I want to switch gears now and say we've seen some products in the market here are some thought starters. We like to always give in these webinars a few ideas on how you might formulate a new product. And since we know choline has such a huge role in focus, we thought, why not have a Focus Plus, which is a B vitamin focused formula powered by VitaCholine. So it's going to have that 800 milligram level that was seen in the accuracy study, along with 400 micrograms of folate, which is there to support homocysteine metabolism and also neurotransmitter synthesis, and then several other B vitamins that help with methylation and help convert food into energy. So really, this is about having the mental focus to be able to do all the things you want to, whether it's physical performance. There are a lot of sports out there that require good hand-eye coordination. These are the types of products that customers are looking for in order to maintain themselves at peak performance. Another concept that we looked at was really focused on the growth that we have seen in the esports arena. Gaming continues to take off, and we have very significant activity within the supplement category. And here we did a product called Mind Fuel, which is really about boosting your brain and having that enhancement of your game. And again, the 800 milligrams that were seen in the study, which showed the accuracy and targeting results, but also along with it, 5 grams of Albion Minerals creatine magna powder in this, what we call a tip-in, or small pack that you can pour the powder into a drink. So this is really an interesting idea for people who are into gaming, into doing the best brain boosting that they can. Mind Fuel really provides a secret weapon to be able to supercharge body and mind and perform at your best. The last one is really focusing in on that area of menopausal development. Essentially what we see is here an idea of a balanced you. And this is nutrition support for different times. So as women pass through menopause, it's tailored and targeted towards replenishing those nutrients that are really important for both mental and physical performance, whether it is supplementing back to an ordinary level of choline with VitaCholine, or having magnesium as Albion Minerals, and methylsulfonylmethane and K2 Vital to help support both joints, healthy skin, hair, and nails, and also bone health through both the calcium mineral, the Albion calcium bisglycinate and the K2 Vital. So it's really tailored to, during that perimenopause period, having the right levels that are needed as you go through the menopausal changes to be able to meet your demands and stay at your best. So I want to close want to dig in a little bit into the performance market. And we are working very hard to really drive choline awareness through the partnership with the New York Jets, which we have formed. And all of that really is driving to vitacholine.com, which is our digital nucleus of our consumer campaign. So you see on the right, we've done a few executions digitally to help build awareness. We've done some influencer campaigns, and all of that is really meant to drive to vitacholine.com. I encourage you to visit the site. It's been redone in a very good way to really highlight consumer benefits. And the idea of the VitaCholine U, which is part of our campaign, is it's you supercharged, you at 100% without limits, and really scientifically optimizing yourself to be able to show the world what you can do. So this is a really nice theme for that supercharged body and mind. Here are a few examples of what we're doing within the context of the MetLife Stadium, which is where the New York Jets play American football. And what you can see is there are these pylons outside where it's advertising. Fans, as they walk into the stadium, being exposed to these messages. They're also seeing them on TVs throughout the stadium, and ultimately also on the big screen during the game. There's about 15 to 20 minutes of exposure done there. So this is all really a very good way of exposing to a much bigger audience in an older adult population that can see the benefits of choline beyond just prenatal. We also have a new product that I wanted to talk about today. If you're interested in putting choline in multivitamins, we have a new solution called VitaCholine ProFlow. And that product is really highlighted and encapsulated to be able to get the best performance. So it doesn't cause any issues within a typical multivitamin formula that sometimes you can see with other forms of choline. So we recommend you talk to Liz if you have any interest in that. And also there is a new era in applications around liquid capsules. Before we saw mostly choline bitartrate. As you know from what I said earlier, choline chloride is about 75% choline. So if you can get choline chloride, which as a liquid, into a liquid capsule, that's a real breakthrough in delivering high levels. So we have a partnership with Vantage ACG, and these single capsule dose options really allow people to deliver higher levels of choline to meet those clinically proven doses. As far as applications, we really do have a whole broad variety of products from, as I said, the encapsulated cholines, all the way through to our 60/80 mesh, which is really ideal for most products. But if you're working with beverages, choline chloride works really well in there. When I showed you the milk product earlier, that's actually with choline chloride. So we really have a solution for each application, and our R&D group is used to helping people as they determine what's the best application or form for their application. So closing with VitaCholine really gives you unbeatable value and efficacy. You get that great quality with the natural L+ tartaric. We know that it's actually having an impact within 2 hours. So it's giving both physical and cognitive support. And then finally, you're getting that peak nutrient density with the choline salts from VitaCholine by having the optimal choline concentration and that fast absorption. So with that, I'm going to conclude my talk, and I'm going to turn over to Liz for some questions.
Thank you, Tom. That was amazing. So we've just had one first question through on the Q&A is just about the bioavailability, really. So the question is, would it be better to take phosphatidylcholine than choline bitartrate, since you need phosphatidyl to get the compound? Can you just talk a bit about that?
Sure. It's a good question because that's the actual compound that's built in the body. But I like to use an analogy almost of Legos. If you have a compound that's built out of a certain certain set of Legos to make a particular shape, that can't get into the body intact. It has to be broken down. And then the body actually forms that right back up again. So that's what we saw in the absorption studies, was that essentially, regardless of the form, the body takes the choline it gets, breaks it down to either phosphocholine or free choline, and then, depending upon the needs that each person has, it will build up the compounds that it needs. So the real currency that's most important is getting as much choline as you can. And that's why we like to say VitaCholine has a big advantage because of our 41% and our 75% salt contents, which really give you a lot of choline as part of the overall compound. Great question, though.
You answered that very thoroughly. Thank you. What came through on the registration links was a few questions around the nature of choline as a molecule in terms of hygroscopicity and how to formulate with it. So can you talk a little bit about some formulation tricks that people need to consider?
Sure thing. I think hygroscopicity, yes, it's a tongue twister, is one of the features we see with lots of nutrients, and choline is no exception. Generally the higher the choline content, the more hygroscopic, or the more it wants to become liquid. And so essentially, that's why a lot of the forms you'll see, choline bitartrate is much more popular in supplements, because even though it's a lower choline content overall, it is much easier to work with. Generally, we don't see a lot of challenges in single or very few ingredient combinations. Where we do see some formatting challenges, and this is why we introduced ProFlow, is in multivitamins. Because one of the things that you'll see in a multivitamin format is that a multivitamin, when exposed to ambient temperature, eventually over time, the tablets will swell and the tablets will spot. That is a function of vitamin C degrading and oxidizing over time. So in multivitamin formulas where there is vitamin C, when you bring choline into the game, it obviously likes to bring water in. And so it's accelerating that process of oxidizing the vitamin C. So very often people will say, hey, why am I getting black spots or why are my tablets swelling? Well, that's why ProFlow has been put out into the marketplace, because it's designed to fully encapsulate the choline, protect it from interaction with other nutrients, and prevent it from actually having an undesirable effect. So it's a brand new novel kind. As I said, if you're looking at a single choline tablet, choline bitartrate really isn't going to be a problem. You don't need the encapsulated form. But if you're looking at a multi-ingredient, ProFlow could be a real help.
Great, thank you. Next question is, do you have any advice on the right dose for older adults or elderly, and what is the risk of a high dose intake?
So I'll take that in two parts. What I would say is the first part of the question around the dose appropriate for older. At a minimum, I would say 550 milligrams of choline is a good target. We've seen from some of the studies I showed earlier that the efficiency of absorption increases as you get older, particularly post 65. More studies are definitely needed to get to a really good level. And honestly, we need a choline biomarker. And that is something that several researchers are working on that will help us get to a much more, what we call an estimated average requirement, or an EAR. And that's going to tell us, here's what most of the population needs at any particular point in time. What we have seen is in the menopause study that I mentioned, as little as 550 milligrams did have a positive impact. But we saw a dose response, and the levels went from 550 to 1100 up to 1650 milligrams. And there was better performance at the higher 1650 level. So we know that more does increase the effect in terms of making that brain behave and be more efficient like a younger brain is. However, that's not even approaching in the US the upper level, which is 3,500 milligrams. So when you think of the 1,650, that's about half of what that is. So with all the people getting very little, it's really important, to be able to do that.
Very good. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between our choline chloride, or the VitaCholine choline chloride, and other choline chlorides on the market, and what to look out for?
I think one of the things that we really work on, as I said, number one, is our production facility. We're really, really concerned with quality in our sourcing. As far as the choline chloride, I think the best reason you can say for why to use VitaCholine chloride is that it is the form that was used in most of the studies I referenced, either as bitartrate or VitaCholine choline chloride. So if you want the one that actually showed the performance in the clinical, VitaCholine is the proven form. I think overall, the reasons we are used more than anyone else in infant formula, and particularly the choline chloride, is because of that safety profile and really having the auditing to prove that our products are high quality and safe.
Perhaps also the TMA level would be worth mentioning here as well in our batch testing.
Thank you for pointing that out as well. We do regularly look at the TMA levels, and TMA is actually the compound that is created when fish decomposes. So when you think of the fish smell, well, that's coming actually from an increase in TMA that's caused by the degradation of fish. So that can also happen in choline because TMA is part of what's used to make choline synthetically. So in our case, we actually have very good controls in place to maintain low odor and minimal TMA levels. Believe me, at really, really small levels, you can detect TMA. It happens to be one of the most sensitive for human smell ingredients. So it's really important to have good manufacturing in order to maintain those low TMA levels. That means your final product isn't going to have a sensory impact.
Thank you. I think we've got time for maybe one more question. So there's a question, just maybe a follow-up. So what's the threshold level for trimethylamine? Maybe that's a good one to finish on.
So a threshold level, it's really detectable at, and this varies by individual, but you can detect it at 2 parts per million. So if you think about that, that's really a very, very low threshold in terms of being able to detect it in the finished product. So a lot of times what you'll see is in generic manufacturing of choline chloride, they don't control for it. You can see levels. We actually do competitive testing. We've seen levels as high as in the thousands and 600, and it smells just like fish. So that's why we work so hard to maintain it at a lower level. Ours always tests below 10 parts per million. That's the standard for USP. But then we also have measures in place to keep it below 2 parts per million. And generally, 80 to 100% of our products meet that threshold.
Amazing. Thank you, Tom. So there are a few other questions, but what I will do is I'll just pull them together, ask Tom to respond, and I will email them out with the slides and the recording of this over the next couple of days. Just before I wrap up, I just want to let everybody know that if you are attending VitaFoods Europe in Barcelona in a couple of weeks, our Balchem's booth is 3G30. So we really welcome meetings, or you're welcome to drop by the booth if you're attending. Our focus is going to be on premier ingredients for premier athletes. So VitaCholine will be very visible, I'm sure. Secondly, I wanted to let you know that our next webinar is booked for the 24th of July, and we'll be discussing the best forms of magnesium for stress and sleep. So please look out for the email to register for that one. I would like to thank everybody for attending, for registering and attending today. I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us learning about choline. Thank you very much to Tom. You've done a fabulous job being bombarded by all the questions and presenting choline so clearly. So thank you. And thanks, Kelly, for helping out behind the scenes. So we'll farewell, everybody. Go well, and we'll see you at the next event.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, Tom.